Okay, just a quick wrap up of hydrogen energy that I talked about in the last video. More than pros and cons. Pros are it's readily available because hydrogen is very abundant, even though it's not by itself. Hydrogen is non-polluting and it is fuel efficient. Cons are it's expensive to get by itself. It's flammable, and in some cases, it still uses fossil fuels.
So next thing we're going to talk about is hydroelectric. Hydroelectric is considered to be the #1 renewable energy source in the world and in the U.S. And the major users are Canada, U.S., Brazil, and China. Now, there are 3 types of hydropower: large, small, and pumps. The large scale uses the high dam across a large river to create a reservoir. So that's like the Hoover Dam, that's what we normally associate when we think of hydroelectric power. Small scale uses a low dam with little or no reservoir access. So it's just basically a little thing on a stream, and there's a micro generator or a small turbine. And it can actually be used to power one's home. So you'll see like some self-sufficient homes that live by a river, they'll have one of these set up. There's a pump storage, which uses surplus electricity from a conventional power plant, mainly a large-scale one, to pump the reservoir, water from a lower reservoir to a reservoir at a higher elevation, so it can go back down when needed again. So how it works. We've been using the term reservoir a lot. A reservoir is basically a body of water that you can tap into that is going to be able to then flow downwards when the dam opens up. As you see on that bottom right-hand picture, on the very left side, that's the reservoir. The dam will open up and the water flows through an area called a penstock. When it flows through the penstock, it spins the turbine because it just uses the potential energy that's stored in gravity, yay physics, and the generator is powered. So here's an example of a hydroelectric dam. You can see that it uses the natural elevation to actually bring the water down. The hydropower plant, and then when the clouds go up, it rains down, and just like runoff, how that goes down the side of a mountain, this goes down the side of a hill. I believe this is the last one, correct? Okay, well anyways, we're gonna go into wind. Oh yeah, we have biodiesel, okay. So wind.
Wait, we didn't cover advantages and disadvantages to hydroelectric power. Do you have that?
I thought I had it in this PowerPoint. I guess I don't. Some advantages to hydroelectric is there isn't pollution. Obviously, you don't have any byproducts after you construct the dam. Now, the dams that are constructed, they do cost a lot. That's a disadvantage, and they have to be maintained. You can't just leave it there and it's going to produce electricity forever. It's going to require some sort of upkeep, although this upkeep is minimal as compared to other things such as nuclear power plants.
What do they use a reservoir for? Multiple advantages besides production of electricity.
Well, they use it to control floods also.
Okay.
If you have a large rainfall and they have this area for a reservoir for a dam, it basically stores up all that water so it doesn't go overflowing into the city.
What else do you know?
Other than that, I've been to a couple places where we use it for whitewater rafting.
Okay, so recreation is another
Yeah.
one. Agriculture. Why? They use it for irrigation systems, correct. I keep getting kicked out. Ooh, my iPad turned off. I didn't even pause.
Wait, I think it is paused.
It is?
Oh, just kidding. Sorry, viewers.
Oh well.
There's no oh well here.
Where'd you go?
Quiet.
We're kind kind of going blind here, so I apologize if the picture on your screen is not matching whatever I'm saying, but we're going to go into wind power. Wind power is the world's most rapidly growing form of indirect solar energy. About 3/4 of the world's wind power is produced on Europe from both inland and offshore. We're going to talk about both of those kinds of wind power. And Denmark actually gets 90% of electricity from wind. And it has to do with its geography, which is part of one of the disadvantages. Now, wind power has more advantages and fewer disadvantages than any other resource. But it's not 100% great. There's always going to be a downside. So the next thing we should be showing should be an offshore wind farm. So basically, it's going to be a picture of a wind turbine off sea. And you have constant sea breezes there. And then there's a little power station that collects it and tubes that go under the water and into the city, where there's going to be a control center where it can be put out into wherever it needs to go. Now, how it works. So you have these large turbines, everyone here has seen them, right? They're built 30 plus meters above the ground. That's about 90 to 100 feet. And the turbines can catch the wind in the sense that like a turbine inside a water plant catches the water. It takes it because technically they're both fluids. It catches it and then it turns. The turbines catch the wind with their propeller blades, which causes it to turn. And then when you have the turning blades spin a little motor and a generator, and then you have electricity. So sizing up wind power, something that I kind of saw that was cool. The one at the very, very top right is a 6 megawatt turbine, and a German company is currently testing this behemoth, and it's the largest. And the one in the middle, which is the 1.5 megawatt, that's the one that's commonly used in farms, and it's about as big as the Empire State Building.
That's a pretty cool picture. Look at the person right there. You see that?
And then the smaller ones would be used on like maybe personal use. So one of the quote-unquote myths about the wind turbine is how loud it is. But in actuality, a lawnmower is louder than a wind turbine. So it's about the size of a blender, and that's if you're standing right next to it. If you're standing 500 meters away from it, then it'll only about sound as much as your refrigerator.
You know, they say that, but realistically, how many wind turbines are there in a wind farm? So you have 4,000 blenders. There's going to be noise pollution. So what they're saying is individually, they're not really loud, but when you put them all together in a farm, I've heard people drive by them and they say they don't even hear it.
In a residential area, you can't have a wind turbine that's closer than 300 meters away from the house. So if you just have one power in a small town,
Right.
then you'll never be able to hear it.
Can one alone power a small town?
It depends. Probably not. Like my grandfather, he was ahead of building a wind turbine at a campus,
Okay.
and the entire college campus is powered, and they make extra that they sell to the city.
And how big is that? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I think it's a 1.5 megawatt.
Are they potential dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, you have maintenance, but there are like very few accidents that have been reported with wind turbines because there are just restrictions on them. And then going on to the pros and cons, no greenhouse gases, obviously, besides production. You have to make stuff, and when you make stuff, there's going to be greenhouse gas. The mass production of wind turbines would cut costs to production of electricity, and it would be the cheapest. If we make these and basically kind of take out all the other forms, it would be the single cheapest.
Cheapest is important for this.
Which is why it's the fastest growing, because as technology increases and production costs are less, there's going to be more and more, so it's going to be cheapest. Cons, right now there's a high initial cost. It took about $1 million to make the one that my grandfather did. I believe it was over $1 million. There is noise pollution, especially attributed with multiple wind farms. And then you have land requirements. There has to be a breeze, but that's like right now the offshore wind farms are really what are like powering Europe in that sense because they have the space to be able to.
So the technology is mainly now in the ocean where they're building these new wind farms. But the ones that are on land, try to remember that you can use the land below the farms for grazing, so they have multiple use of land. So you kind of disturb the land in the beginning and then regroup what you could do with the land later.
Last but not least, we have biomass, which isn't as big as a scale as wind, as we were talking about, as in like powering entire cities. But it is an alternative energy that's commonly used today. So most biomass is burned directly for heating and cooking. And in developing countries, it's where they get the majority of their energy because obviously they don't have the money to go and invest in these giant wind turbines or a dam or anything like that. Now, biomass plantations plant and harvest large amounts of basically crops that they can then grow for biomass. Now, they have to be fast growing because you can't have like waiting for a tree to grow for 20 years just to power your car.
And they have to be fuel energy crops. So they have to be high heat content crops because that's the end result. You want to be able to use the heat.
However, there are quite a few of those in the world, which is why the poorer countries, like we were talking about the breadbasket when we were going over the types of land, all those are very good things that can be used for biomass fuel. Now, here's a biomass power plant. This is more modernized, but you have the storage area over there, and it's almost like a coal power plant. It's burned, water heats, turns to steam, steam turns the turbine, water cools and condenses, while the turbine spins the generator for power. Now, one thing that we're going to talk about is biofuels, which is a subtype of biomass energy. Now, biofuels are a certain type of biomass. So all biofuels are biomass, but not all biomass are biofuels. If that makes sense. Now, basically these biofuels are gaseous and liquid forms, and they're converted into these forms by bacteria or chemical processes. Now, biogas, which is a really important word, is a mixture of 60% methane and 40% CO2.
You have to know that.
The 60-40.
The methane CO2.
That's what biogas is. And we're going to talk about, also going into, there are two main types of biogas. Okay. One is ethanol, which is basically that's a video on how ethanol is made, and it had a lot better description. But basically the end product is called gasohol, which is gasoline mixed with the ethanol in order to power gasoline engines. So instead of using like 100% gasoline, you could use like a 50-50 ratio or something along those lines, depending on the technology, and you'd be able to cut down on the use of fossil fuels. Now, methanol isn't used as commonly as gasohol because you have to have a certain type of engine to burn it. But methanol is generally made from natural gas. It can be produced from carbon dioxide, coal, and biomass. So it's more of a combination, and it's used as a picture of a race car. So because it's used in race car engines. Now, pros and cons really quickly.
Before you go, other types of biomass fuels besides crops. You've got garbage, you've got collection of methane,
Natural gas.
and natural gas is really a combo that you use, but you got to think not just crops are grown. We're literally using, remember that waste management is using their own garbage to power. Okay.
Finally, pros, fewer harmful emissions than fossil fuels burning alone. Growing biomass material, it can actually remove CO2 when you're making the plants. It removes the CO2 from the atmosphere, and there are various types, and those types are fairly plentiful. Cons, industrialized farming actually uses more energy to produce the crops than the crops actually take.
So
that's
I
why
would say
there's a variety of uses.
the con is using crops. There's a positive because you're carbon cycling, but the pro is using waste, okay, in terms of biomass, and we're done.